Hi everyone, welcome to my fourth four-player game of the International Championship. This game is between myself, Tamirys, Silent, and Genghisip. Just going to go quickly over the winners and leaders to look out for. Um, there's right now only Colosseum and Acropolis are on the first row, or first section. But there's still a library. I think Hanging Garden is pretty good, is not bad as well. And then there's actually Colossus with the whole Suez and International Road Cross idea. Definitely some good colonization leaders too in the mix with Barbarossa, Isabella, and Columbus. Not so much support in the second age, but it could still be an idea that people could go for. Additionally, there's not a whole lot of militarism in the H1 and H2 leader rows. There's no Napoleon or Catherine down here. There's no Zizka or Joan here, so not a lot of military actions. That's basically what I'm pointing at. Although, Barbarossa plus Great Wall or Khan plus Great Wall could make like a really strength-based game. It just seems like it's much harder to do without extra military. It's just much harder for people to force military as much without extra military actions. So if for some reason somebody does get Barbarossa plus Great Wall or Khan plus Great Wall with extra units or something, that person could reign really strong throughout the rest of the game. But it's still hard to do because there's only one Great Wall, and it's really hard for anybody else to push strength without it. In any case, let's go on to the picks and stuff. Tamirys, for some reason, takes cultural heritage. I'm very uncertain if this is like his correct pick that he wanted to do. I think Cleopatra or Colosseum would be great here. I think both these are absolutely top tier, but maybe there's something with this pick that I didn't really understand. And he does work with Ashoka because you can hold on to cultural heritage for a long time, and maybe Tamirys really does value Ashoka very, very highly. I am just going to take Cleo and Colosseum. I think this is just an amazing start. I think these are both top tier. Silent just takes Richland and Hippocrates. Not 100% sure if Hippocrates is correct. I personally like Alex a little bit more. Yeah, but I mean Hippocrates is totally fine. And then Genghisip takes Acropolis and Alex. Floating civil action, and I thought something was fine. I'm not usually a huge fan of Acropolis, but he does work pretty well with Gates. He does work pretty well with Meyer. He does work really well with Pierre, and early on he also works pretty well with Darwin or Bach. So it's not the worst pickup. I'm just not a fan of this wonder at all generally. So I think that these in 4-player games especially that this bonus here kind of contradicts itself. Like in a 4-player game, you're usually having to push a decent amount of strength, so you can't really afford to have like more than 3 units in urban buildings anyways, and then you change government giving you to 4 units in urban buildings. That just seems like not a bonus that you really care about too much. Of course, there's a little bit of extra science, but if you only have 3, maybe 4 units in urban buildings total, a couple labs, a temple, or something, then you're only saving a handful of science, like 3 or 4 by H2. And then in H3, I'm not really sure how much it matters because, yes, it gives you a good science discount, but you can't you would have used the government. You already would have used the government switch already, and you've put a lot of government. You put a lot of science into your government already, and maybe you can't really afford to have another government change at H3. But in any case, that's just like my little mini rant on Acropolis, how I just don't think it works in 4-player games. Moving on, Tamirys, he does take Ashoka. I actually would probably prefer Moses, but he's not guaranteed a wonder in this line. He could have taken like Homer plus Homer plus Library of Alexandria and nothing else, or Homer plus Colossus. But the line he takes also makes a lot of sense because he's going to go with Ashoka and then just kind of do normal things. That way, he's spending his actions a little bit more efficiently, and he can possibly get an Ashoka bonus with his cultural heritage next turn. I'm also going to just do normal things. Take Engineering Genius. Because I started with a lab, the alternative was that I could have gone pop, build here, instead of taking Engineering Genius, and then... instead of building this lab, I could have gone pop, build Coliseum, build a piece of Coliseum, and then take Urban Growth, and also elect Cleo as my 4 actions. That would be about a similar amount of resources. But basically, I'm thinking that I could just hold off on building the mine for a bit, kind of let my food build up. It's really close. They're both pretty similar. I'm not really too worried about missing an event. I don't usually play events anyways, so I don't really need this population. It's really close and kind of just more like a denial pick as well. Anyways, Silent goes for the library, Socrates, and the mine. Also doesn't increase pop. Genghisip Alex, basically we all just do normal things. And not really much to look at here, besides him getting Shoka's getting a bonus going. Not a lot of good picks. There is drama for possible Bach, but there's no endgame theater leader. So, theology does make sense. You do need some happy face solution, and I think this is just a safer pick. So like I said, I'm just going to go with the Coliseum building and not build the mine right away. Next turn I can build a step and build a mine. So that's kind of just was my logic from before, is that I kind of want to increase my food production just a little bit. Or keep my food production a little bit higher for a little bit. And then take the Code of Laws, because I think this is over the Knights even, because I do think the 5th civil action is just really important early on. Just normal things. Just generally spacing out all these actions pretty efficiently, I think is totally fine. Silent did have to take Library on 2, he didn't increase pop last turn, so just kind of making up actions, not doing something like taking Knights on 2, where you'd get into more civil action debt. Okay, and then, everybody just does normal things. Knights over Swordsman, of course, I think that's just more logical. And then Tamirys takes Swordsman, starts Silk Road as his first wonder. He has a cultural heritage, so it kind of makes it a little bit better. Now he has a full bonus for Ashoka. And then, of course, just starting the Silk Road over taking more cards, I think, is fine, because he has a lot of civil actions that he needs to do. So I wouldn't invest in taking any more cards, of course. Now for me, I think I seeded Barbarians. I do lead the culture, but Tamirys has cultural heritage. I think by the time the deck flips, I'll probably not be the one subject to Barbarians, since I don't have a wonder that produces culture. Both Genghisip and Tamirys do, and so does Silent as well. So I increase pop, build a mine, build a step, take irrigation. There is Barbarossa in the game. Irrigation's on 1. I think taking the production building for 1 or trying to figure out a way to get iron is a little bit better. Silent Seeds finishes Library, takes iron. Oh, he doesn't finish Library, takes iron and the Swordsman. He had enough resources too. I guess this makes sense to take Swordsman here, be a little bit safer. Tamirys has Swordsman, Genghisip has Knights. I'm the only one without a military tech, and he probably just doesn't want to skip out on the military technology. Um, it's pretty bad to be weakest in a 4-player game, and I'm the one who's set up to be weakest right now. But I do have Coliseum, we do have Irrigation. There are good ways for me to set up strength in the future, so I'm not too worried. Silent's definitely a little bit more worried than I am, because he doesn't have a wonder as appropriate for that, I guess. And his production building, Iron, doesn't necessarily allow for building more units as well as Irrigation does. Genghisip Seeds, takes the free temple, goes for Columbus. He needed a new leader anyway, finished Acropolis. So Civil Life. Tamirys uses this to increase population, and the initial one for the development of religion takes temple. Takes Code of Laws, plays it. Taking it on one seems really good. And then has to really struggle to get out of corruption by building another farm, basically. If he started building on Silk Road, doesn't really do much. Couldn't increase population anymore, so he builds this farm to get out of corruption. It's a little bit questionable, I think. It is really tough to deal with corruption and stuff. There are other ways to get out if he didn't use Code of Laws. Maybe he played Swordsman. Maybe just finishes the Silk Road instead. But he still wouldn't have been out of corruption, I believe, if he finished the Silk Road, because he did use some actions to increase pop this turn as well. So if he played but yeah, I'm not. There is a merit to a third farm right now. I do like 3 farms in general, with certain setups, usually with Shishka or Maria Teresa, but neither of them are in the game. So yeah, it's a little bit questionable just because it definitely makes your strength a little bit capped. But he does have Theology for extra happy faces, so it's not bad for sure. Right. Anyways, I believe I seeded Good Harvest here. I have the Irrigation, so of course I think Good Harvest is good for me. Take the Knights because I do need a military tech. Finish Coliseum, and this for me is the easiest way to get out of corruption as well, is to start building these Knights. If I remember, no, never mind. Right, now Silent finishes, goes for Swordsman, finishes Library. The deck is flipped, so he wants to be a little bit stronger than me and Tamirys. Makes sense, since the deck is flipped. Strength events can come in. Takes Iron and takes Rich Land and Monarch. Trade routes. Agreement with Silent. He takes the food to resources side, which I don't necessarily know if that's the better side for him. This is definitely the better side for Silent since he has Iron. But usually I don't feel like you should take this side, this food to resource side, unless you have Irrigation. But he does have Columbus, so he could have extra population with a colony. So yeah, seems fine. And then Genghisip also goes for Knights and Needle of Army. So I know that I can at least get a tactic now. It takes Iron as well to start building it next turn. So because of this Iron, I kind of feel like Genghisip could have gone to the other side of the pact, but yeah, it's his call. And then, gets a little bit stronger than the rest of us. Tamirys does not seed, and goes for a little bit more strength, so he's not the weakest. Here, I'm not going to seed. I'm going to Terror, though. Just probably going to discard Aggressions. And then I also want to get out of being the weakest. And I go for a farm. Going for a farm is a little bit questionable because this is the first turn I haven't used Cleopatra now. So I'm missing out on her bonus resource. If I didn't go for the farm, I could go for Alchemy's next turn, and then hopefully get out. Hopefully start using her resources again. But at the same time, I literally used her 4 times already. I'm pretty happy with just that. And I have the good harvest in the deck, so I did want to start going for some food production. I take the irrigate. I take instead of upgrading again, I take the rich land though because I am lacking resources in general. I do want another population out for a warrior, and then eventually copy this medieval army so I can get up to 10 strength. It's just that I'm not taking advantage of Cleo, and that could be a bad thing. But at the same time, increasing production right now is also very good. So that goes for Michelangelo. He does have the iron, so it does make sense. There's actually quite a few wonders that haven't been come out yet, so he should definitely be able to get one. And then, again, he wants to be a little bit stronger. So Genghisip did have vast, so he did have extra food. So all those things I said about the food part, they make no sense at all. So this is totally fine for him. And then he just goes for the iron. Tamirys goes for iron as well, and he actually stays the weakest, so I think people are going to start feeling comfortable seeding again. All right, from here, I seed Reign of Terror. I think that with the medieval army and knights already, I will probably not be the weakest. I also have thoughts of so the Crusades hits, and it's not the biggest strength event, but I see the medieval army. I have a couple thoughts here. I'm thinking that I could possibly go for Saladin, but then I realized, I still have this alchemy in hand, and that there's Leo still left to be taken. Tamirys is not set up for Leonardo. Genghisip and Silent already had their age 1 leaders, so I'm kind of just thinking about holding off for him instead. I still have Cleopatra to go for alchemy a little bit cheaper next turn. And then I just decided to make it a little bit easier for me to go into alchemies as well. So pretty much thinking about going a more science route with Leonardo. I'm not like the biggest fan of Saladin anyways. He does provide an extra civil action, but sometimes I just don't think it's enough. And I really think the extra science and resource production from Leonardo could really help out. In any case, Silent goes for a Great Wall, which is a really good pickup with him having Swordsman and Iron already. And then, again, he wants to get a little bit stronger. Makes it a little bit so he's a little bit defensible as well. And then takes the Warfare, which I think is pretty good on 1 civil action. But at the same time, when you have Monarchy, you don't really need Warfare. So, there's thoughts of that. Genghisip goes for Machu Picchu, because he can get the Iron and Irrigation going. And then he also goes up to 11 strength with the medieval army. This is one of those situations where Genghisip could be in a bind because he only has 4 civil actions, not a lot of science production. This could be a very difficult game for him as well, because if he goes for Machu Picchu, whenever you have Machu Picchu and only 4 civil actions and only 2 science production, you can get into trouble a lot. He does have Acropolis though, so it does make government transitions a little bit easier. So basically, I think that if he can somehow get at least a 5th civil action, he could be relatively okay. But even still, 5 civil actions with Machu Picchu production is really difficult to spend all those resources sometimes. Tamirys goes for Saladin, which I think is a pretty natural choice. He could have gone for Genghis Khan using the medieval army, but honestly, Swordsman with Fighting Band is pretty fine. And I think the extra civil action is pretty much what he wanted to go for instead of the extra 2 strength. So he goes for Swordsman, goes up to 8, and takes Culture Heritage. Now has 6 civil actions with Saladin. Did have enough time to go for Leo, and that's pretty much all I do. So pretty fine there. Silent goes for Warfare, takes the breakthrough, starts Great Wall. I definitely like this instead of going for the resource upgrade production. It is a little surprising that Silent goes for Warfare instead of Monarchy, though. So it's possible that he's just looking for Revolution, or he's really just going to ignore this Monarchy and go for an H2 government instead. I think it's not too late to go for Monarchy, so I probably would have done it, but it's definitely a choice, and I can see why he would go for a different government. He can get like Republic plus Warfare in 2 turns, so it's not bad to skip. He still has the option to go for Monarchy next turn if he really needs it, but yeah, it's not too bad. Genghisip goes for an aggression. It's pretty reasonable to go for it since Tamirys only had 2 cards. Even still, no matter what, it would take his actions to do, or take all those cards to do. So it kind of pressures Tamirys taking civil actions and might force him to take strength more. Genghisip does go for Monarchy to get that fifth civil action. Makes it a little bit more stomachable to get out the Machu Picchu stuff, but does mean that he won't have like a better H2 government. But I still think this is very reasonable to do, so pretty happy with Genghisip's position. Or I'm sure he's happy in the situation. Tamirys goes for St. Pete's and finishes it right away because he has so many civil actions. He could have also gone for a theology, but then, yeah. Now he also needs to increase strength, and he couldn't just take the civil action here because he would still be susceptible to Genghisip for another aggression, so he needed to take the strength here. Unfortunately, I know that Reign of Terror is here, so I'm still not too worried about strength being being one of the 2 weakest and stuff. Silent will get stronger than me on his coming turn, but I do know that Barbarians is here, and only +3 will still make Silent second weakest when it comes to Genghisip. So I'm not really going to push for strength for a little bit. I want to focus on my economy. And there's no real easy way to do it. So yeah, let's just see what I go for. I forget what I seeded here, actually. Oh no, I'm sorry. I forget what I seeded here. I think it was Scientific Breakthrough. Oh no, it was Dark Ages. Okay. Or interesting. Okay, I see Dark Ages. So the opposite of Scientific Breakthrough. Or did I? No. Was it strategic? Okay, I do see Dark Ages. There's a kind of a reason for this, I guess. It's in the second deck. I'm gonna go for Republic next turn. So I think that me having my H2 government out, I'll be able to spend science every single turn, even though that my science production is quite high comparatively to others. So it's not the worst seed, and it could make other people's turns really poor, especially if I see that Silent is trying to save science for a H2 government. It could make it so that it's really difficult for him to transition. So I do go for this because Republic was here. I seeded Dark Ages, and because I can make the transition before it happens, it's kind of like an interesting line that I do take. For the rest of my turn, I do get out of corruption by building another religion. Not really much else to do for that. Silent does finish good at wall, so now I'm the weakest. Finishes upgrading iron production. So we can see that he definitely doesn't want to go for this monarchy right here. Genghisip goes for Suez. I don't know about this one. I think if he was looking for a wonder, he should probably take Universitas. He already has really good resource production with Machu Picchu. So unless he has autonomous, which I know he doesn't, I can't see this being like that good of a pickup, to be honest. Even if he had like inhabited too, I still think that extra resource production over extra science production or something isn't really where he wants to be. Alternatively, he could have just started going for irrigation as well, maybe pick up Brand Circus, knowing that there's still Pierre, knowing that he could use like he could go for like a really strong military game with all these resources, a little bit of happiness, and a lot of population as well. So I'm not too excited about this Suez pickup for him. I just think that it's kind of like a resource overkill. Tamirys takes the first selective breeding, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's a really high value card. Both Silent and, well, I guess Silent also wants it and doesn't really have a lot to do, so I do think that starting to go for selective breeding next turn could be very reasonable. And then Tamirys continues to, he gets a little bit stronger, so he doesn't need to take strength anymore. So I do go for this Republic, and then from here, there's a couple things that I want. I want this strategy, and I want this coal. Since I'm on Republic, strategy is pretty useful. Coal, because I'm going for resource production. I don't necessarily need to take it this turn, so I could also think about taking cannons or reserves or something. But I do have one issue, which is that I only have 6 science next turn, and I can't go for either one. So I think about this for a bit. I was thinking maybe I should start building a wonder, like go for Universitas and Engineering Genius. And then just, I guess, kind of, what, say go for Universitas, build a step, go for a knight or something, or a warrior, and that will get me out of corruption. Then I could take like Engineering Genius and reserves, I believe. So that would be 1, 5, 6, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 actions, 7 to actually get Republic out. But I still really value this strategy, and I think I really want to take it. And I really want to go for coal. I think in a sense I don't need too much more science production, and I think it's probably better just to work on my resource production as soon as I can. So I do build a lab in order to be able to go for coal next turn, and I take it right away because I'm actually a little bit worried that it gets denied. So I just spend the rest of my actions taking these. It's kind of questionable to take this coal. There is a couple yellow cards that I could grab. Cannons is also a really valuable card as well. But I just go with this because I know that I can for sure go for coal next turn, and I'm kind of playing myself a little bit safe. I do stay the weakest, but that's just something I'm going to have to live with. I also have these new deposits that I could possibly want to go for with the coal, but then I look at Genghisip, and he already has really good resource production. Both Tamirys and Silent have fully upgraded iron, so I may or may not go for that as well. Silent Seeds gets historic territory. It's not a bad one. It's not a bad one to get. Now he goes for Universitas and Engineering Genius, so that's kind of another reason is that Silent's turn becomes really good if I give him Universitas. And then he gets out of not being weakest. But he's still one of the 2 weakest, and I know Barbarians is in, so that could affect him negatively. Rats hits, and it hits everybody relatively minimally. I mean, pretty much everyone had increased population as much as they could. Going for Nobel makes a lot of sense to increase science production. And then grabbing the cannons. Tamirys seeds reveals barbarians, so Silent does not have a free population this time. Goes for Conwan. And then takes the scientific method. He has the cultural heritage, so he can still go for one of these next turn. But if like Dark Ages flips, he can only go for selective breeding. I don't seed. I could have seeded new deposits, but everyone would get like a really big benefit, so I wasn't really sure if I could have. I can't really seed border conflicts as I'm the weakest. Can't seed the other two, so I just pass in the meantime. But also I know that Reign of Terror is in the deck, and I didn't really want to hurry up into it. But at the same time, I know that I'm not too affected by Reign of Terror since I can just lose a warrior, and I have the Hussars. So I go for my coal, then I take a bunch of cards. I think the Rifleman could be useful. Go for Bach and Opera eventually. There's not like a lot of really good leaders that I would be shooting for. Bach was on 1, Opera was on 1, or is that correct? Bach was on 2, but Opera was on 1, so I had a bunch of resources to take, and I don't really need the frugality as much, and the only thing else that I could have really taken is breakthrough. So I mostly just take a bunch of cards, and then I take this journalism. I was thinking about leaving it here, but I kind of felt like Silent might go for journalisms if I left it. So this is mostly just a denial pick. I didn't really think about going for it at all. Silent Seeds, feels good harvest. Goes for the Monarchy, because I guess he can't wait anymore. Seeing as both Tamirys and I both actually picked up the first 2 governments. Finishes Universitas and takes breakthrough. So Silent kind of punished for holding off on the monarchy for a long time. But he's still in a perfectly fine position. His resource and science production are pretty reasonable. And he's actually has quite a he's building up a culture lead on some of us. Alright, so now Reign of Terror hits. Let's just gonna have to deal with it. Goes for irrigation and hits corruption. So this is one of those situations where, like I said, that it could be an issue to go for this build, just not having enough civil actions to spend all these resources. So I do try to bid for this. One of the reasons the Reign of Terror is about to hit me. I win it for pretty minimal, so I'm really happy that I get Reign of Terror, and all it does is I lose an idle worker now instead. This does keep me pretty weak, but I can go for the strategy, and I can pretty easily defend from this point on as well. I'll still have 7 science next turn, so I can go for Opera. Well, I guess it'll only cost 5. But increase resource production, grab the cannons and the cavalrymen, so now I'm set up for every tactic possible in H3. And then just grab the efficient upgrade and the rich land. I'm looking at the rich land for using the coal, efficient upgrade to go for religion into opera. And yeah, I think I'm in a pretty reasonable spot. I could have gone for like ocean liner as well. But I already have the irrigation going. I don't mind eventually building another one here. So yeah, basically I could have gone, instead of grabbing some of these military techs, instead of grabbing like the cannons and the rich land, I could have gone for the ocean liner. But I do think it's pretty late, so ocean liner isn't nearly as good as it could be. And I guess I'm pretty content with just my irrigation plus the extra yellow tokens that I have already. That goes for max, which, you know, kind of sucks since he just went for monarchy, but I think he kind of recognizes that the age is going to end. The other two leaders aren't necessarily very good for him either, and I imagine that he wants to get out of this monarchy as cheaply as possible. Goes for cannons and defensive army. So now Silent is very strong. Alright, Genghisip. The Dark Ages flips. Like I said, I would be spending a lot. Other people would have a lot of difficulty trying to spend their science, so I actually lose a little bit less, even though I have the highest science production. So, Genghisip finishes. Suez gets inhabited territory, I believe. Yeah. And starts building much more knights, which makes sense since I just revealed Hussars. So, I did know that that was an issue with revealing it right away, but you know, Hussars on knights not the most threatening thing in general. It's more like a defensive idea. Also, there's no more cavalrymen, so it's difficult for him to get too much stronger from having these Hussars. But then he actually seeds conquistadors, so they're both pretty much the same for him, honestly. Alright, historic. I can't really bid for this. I just don't have the population to go for it. So Silent wins this one. Tamirys finally goes for food production. Now his economy is in a pretty good spot. Has a good amount of actions with Conmon, good science, relatively good resources, and now good food production. The only downside that I would look at Tamirys' civilization is that he doesn't have cannons. And he has a bunch of warriors. So he's really, really looking for rockets, basically, in order to support his civilization. Silent, luckily, revealed defensive army for him, but there are no more cannons available, which is one of the other reasons that I really wanted to take it earlier, just to deny the maximum strength from Tamirys. Yes, we'll talk about this. This was a mistake. I was looking at a very different turn with classic army here, going up to 21 strength. So yeah, this was just a mistake. I think Tamirys, even though he's limited by not having cannons and only being able to go for rockets, he actually has 15 science. So he can go for quite a bit of stuff, or at least 15 plus a breakthrough, so at least 18 science. At least 15 up to 18. So this means that, since he has Silk Road too, that this could go up to 16. So this is a huge mistake because his potential strength, Tamirys' in the highest form, could go with like a couple more warriors, maybe like fundamentalism as a card, or military theory, at least one of those two. And just getting that +5 or +6 is already a lot. But in any case, I accidentally do this war. I thought 21 would be actually a little bit too risky, or just not even worth it. If he can get up to like 20 or 21, then there's very little point. But I only end at 18 here because I didn't think I was warring because I just didn't cancel it. So, kind of really praying at the moment that that the really bad cards don't show up, like military theory or fundamentalism. All right, Silent, trade agreement pact with Genghisip, goes for justice system, and then finishes Ocean Liner, which I think is good in his position since he was limited on civil actions. Having the Ocean Liner finish kind of gives him a little bit more. So, and then he can't really go for architecture because he doesn't really have the science to support it. Genghisip goes for War over Territory. Genghisip goes up to 23, which is a much more reasonable number to be warring for. And the War over Territory is definitely a little bit better than the War over Technology in this case. So I'm pretty happy to see that there's no military theory or fundamentalism. But there are the pro sports, so Tamirys does get stronger without having to commit more, without really having to commit more units to these swordsmen, basically. He does, I guess I do force him, quote unquote. Well, I guess I didn't force him anyways, because he needs to go to 19 to not lose to Tamirys, or to not lose to Genghisip that badly. So he goes to 19, just to only lose one token. He only beats me by one, which I'm actually really happy about, because this could have been a disaster if he won by like 3 or 4. So losing by one, I'm not too upset. I was never planning to go for the journalisms anyways, so I just feel kind of fortunate and lucky here. So I go for more theaters. I'm going to build another farm. I guess I'm pretty much committed to the Hussars. Or in general, I just need more population. So I'm pretty happy just expanding this and building more farms to get another population out next turn. So I increase my culture production, increase my food production, grab a couple yellows, and these pro sports. I grabbed the pro sports because I still will probably need them for my happy face solution. There's also still Pierre in the game. And my line of thinking is I might not be able to go for Air Force. So if I go for like Hussars with tanks and pro sports, that could be a reasonable amount of strength anyways. Something I kind of forgot to do that I probably should is I should take stock of where we're at in the game since we're at the start of H3. I'll let my production finish. So without Silent and without Genghisip getting their first H3 turn, or getting their first H3 turn, is you can see that the culture count's actually pretty close between, I would say between us three, Tamirys, myself, and Silent. I have really good production because I'm Bach. Silent and Tamirys have a little bit of a lead already, but we know that I know that Silent's culture production can go up a lot higher if he just changes leaders. In terms of the actual game, for benefits, I have really good resource production, relatively good food production. Silent has really good resource production and good population because of Ocean Liner. So, and then Genghisip has a lot of basically everything. Tamirys has a lot of food and science, but not a lot of resources. You can say that everyone has a really, really balanced colony at this point. So, with close culture production, with close resource production, things can get very, very. It can be very difficult to decide who's like the winning player in this situation. One of the big benefits for Tamirys is that he has Newton plus a lot of science production right now. But again, his units are kind of in a way that aren't very good for him right now. He has the potential to go for, if he's really lucky and gets Modern Army, then his strength potential goes up way higher. But right now, being only on infantry is kind of a liability, especially, because you usually want more cannons in H3 than you want infantry. All right, Silent, since he's robes, goes for this communism, which is a really big upgrade for him. And then goes for the Rev idea and the military buildup, which just leaves him flexible. He could have gone for like computers and urban growth instead, but I think he just wanted to maintain maximum flexibility, even though computers works really well for both of these. But yeah, I'm a little unsure. Still a little unsure about the Rev idea. I think computers and urban growth might have been a little bit better, just like a tiny bit. But it's very small, and this allows him to be very flexible. So. All right, Genghisip wins that one. Arms industry. Everybody gets 2, which is the most fair arms industry I've ever seen. Genghisip goes for methods, and for the first time in a couple turns, it gets out of corruption. He can always build more knights because he knows that there's hussars to go for. He can't really afford to spend 3 actions taking the tanks, so I think this is the best turn for him. But because he didn't take the tanks, it means that I'm going to be going for them. Alright, wealthy territory. Tamirys has extra colonization anyways, so didn't really feel like contesting it. And then Tamirys goes for computers, which I'm a little bit surprised about since he already had method and stuff. I'm honestly not sure what he could have done, but the computers are a good pickup. I just don't know if it's worth spending 6 resources and science to go for computers that way. Yeah, it does increase the science production a lot, but that was his biggest benefit anyways. It's like somewhat of a civil action intensive thing to do is basically what I'm getting at, and instead of spending those civil actions doing that, he could have just taken like basically all the yellow cards. So this is a preferential choice though. Not really one that's rooted in if this is best or not. He does take all the other yellow cards, leaves the rough idea. So for me, I take finish upgrading the last temple, take the tanks, and just start going for them. I kind of want to finally not be weakest, so this is kind of nice. I take the Rev Idea, which is probably the best card for me, and the satellites, mostly as a denial, because I'm not going to have a lot of science. I probably need to spend 7 for the pro sports, and there's still a possibility of going for Air Force, but this is again more like a denial pick to reduce impacts of progress and variety. Alright, Silent goes for modern infantry. So Silent actually only drew 2 H3 cards, 1 from his first turn and 0 from the second. So I did not feel the need to deny modern infantry at the time, but out of those 2 draws he had entrenchments, and this actually makes him extremely dangerous. Has a lot of the reserves and military theory, which I don't think he really plans on going for. So Genghisip flip freedom movement, and I'll talk about what that implies later. Gets SARS, grabs the Air Force, corruption again. And now Tamirys freedom movements into the arena. Goes for Pierre and another arena. So Tamirys has now a lot of resource production. Sorry, a lot of culture production. Alright, so I'll talk about what this implies, the freedom movement. This freedom movement means that Silent can move anything into cannons, pretty much, and then upgrade a couple times or build more cannons as well. So right now he's only using the tactic once. And uses the tactic again, he could he'll be at 43 with just the tactic, extra cannon, 45. He has so many resources. He has 28 resources, and if he just moves an iron into cannon, then he still has the whole 28. So he can upgrade, or he can just upgrade and then build 2 more afterwards by disbanding even more. So like Silent really doesn't need the population that he has out right now. Although if he does war this turn is what I'm trying to say. If he does war this turn, he doesn't get 3 full entrenchments. He only gets 2 and an outdated. But just with 1 cannon itself brings him up to 45. 2 more cannons is another plus 6, so 51 plus an upgrade, so 54 plus the tactic again. sorry, plus the outdated tactic. That would be 60 strength total. If he somehow got a war this turn. And that is actually pretty hard to defend for anybody, really. Tamirys only has 6 resources. Potentially Genghisip can defend, but there's pretty much no point to go for Genghisip because he has the lowest culture. And I do have a good amount of resources as well, but my tactic isn't nearly as good as his. So the implication of that freedom of movement with such a strong tactic, it meant that I needed to think very defensively this one turn and kind of do it in the best way as I could possible. So what I did do is that I seeded economic progress in here, which I generally would not do, even though I have good resource production. I think I would usually seed like impact of government or industry here. But if Silent goes for a war, I want the maximum chance that I can flip out industry. It might not happen for this coming turn, but in the future, I want to prepare for the fact that Silent has a really high strength potential. Like, I mean, I get that there's no way of, sorry, I'll let this resolve. So by letting this resolve, you can see that I have one chance at getting an impacted, or the economic progress out, just in case that the war happens. I could potentially go for Gandhi as well in order to prevent that from happening. But there's actually a big reason why I can't. And this is the last game of my last game of the International Championship, and the last game to actually complete as well. And before this game, Silent and myself are basically both at risk for being relegated. The other person that's being at risk for being relegated is Wozniak, but he's in the other game. And that game hasn't completed yet. So at this point in time, Wozniak and I have the same amount of points, but he beats me on tie breaks. And I am ahead by Silent by, I think, 1 point. So I either need to beat Silent in this game, or I need to beat Wozniak in his game, like in terms of placement. Like if he takes second, I need to take first. If he takes third, I need to take at least second, that kind of thing. But because Silent is the very threatening one in this game, it looks like it's going to be really, really difficult for me to beat him at this point. Even though my culture production is high, his strength potential is so high that I'm just going to have to be extremely worried about it. And if I go hide behind Gandhi, then the chance of me winning this game become much lower. It basically is saying Gandhi at this point would maybe help me keep in second, but I don't think that I'd be able to get a lot of like points very quickly. And I can't really rely on Wozniak taking third or fourth since he's a very good player himself. So I'm a little bit on the I need to get kind of lucky phase, and I need to either get a lot of points really quickly. I just need to play for the win, is basically what I'm trying to say. It's really, really difficult to just rely on getting a second and advancing here because of the way that the placements are set out and because I'm so at risk for being relegated. So a lot of the decisions that I do come with that in mind, which is that I want to be able to stay aggressive and not go for Gandhi here. Even if that were the case, going for Gandhi, Tamirys still has all these military actions and military theory in hand. So this is not really a safe defensive play anyways. So I'm just going to ignore that route completely. Try to make the maximum amount of points that I can as opposed to trying to play as defensively as I can. And that's part of another reason that I did not actually want to seed economic progress, because it makes people's defense a little bit better. But Silent has put me in kind of in a bind on this turn because of how strong he can potentially get. And I wouldn't be able to seed economic progress later because it might be in the next deck afterwards. So this was kind of a risky play. So play the reserves for food, build up my tanks a little bit more, go for pro sports so I can make some hand space. And then, yeah. And then I just take these computers because there's a possibility that I can go for Marie pretty much, or Gates or Meyer. Like, I don't expect to be able to play it, but it does technically enable these leaders in a way. Efficient upgrade isn't really too useful for me, but I could take it instead because of this impact to industry. All right, Silent Seeds. He does not have a war or anything. Seeds fast. Tamirys wins it pretty easily. I'm pretty much thinking that there's no way I can afford the resources since I only have tanks, so I wouldn't even bid for it anyways. So could never afford the resources in this situation. Upgrades that one freedom movement. So he already puts him a lot at that strength, and he still has all these resources remaining. Genghisip offers me this, which he must not have any other political action. It's just what I'm reading at. I have pretty high strength potential. Obviously, he can't offer it to Silent in this case. He can offer it to Tamirys, but Tamirys is the big war target since he doesn't have a lot of resources. So I guess he chose me as the second weakest to be able to go for this. But I have war plans of my own. Tourism, goes for democracy. Still has plenty of science, so can't afford it. Urban goes to another arena, and then goes for internet. So Tamirys only has 10 resources. There weren't any really to grab from here, so building arena is the most cost efficient for him. But having only 10 resources, potentially 14 with economic progress, means that he can still go for, like 2 rockets or something, or 2 air force. But it does mean that his strength potential is pretty low, is what I'm trying to say. I did draw the War of Culture that turn, and I believe that I make a big mistake in the way that I do this. So economic progress is one of these three, or one of these two. So I do a couple things. I think that, first off, I'm going to assume that Tamirys has 14 resources. But in that case, it really doesn't matter too much regardless. 14 doesn't even give him 3 cavalrymen, so he can't even go for conquistadors or anything. It could give him a rocket, like a rocket and another 3 cost unit, so +8 plus whatever from the units itself. Sorry. +8 units. +8 strength from the units itself, and then whatever tactic. So if it's like modern army, then maybe he can get there a little bit stronger. But so I go for, so I do need to consider what Silent's potential culture is at this point, which is, I'll let this row fill out, which is there's still Red Cross and there's still Spaceflight in the game. Sorry, there's still Red Cross and there's still fast food chains in the game, and Spaceflight is right here. So Silent has a pretty good lead on me, right? So at the end of my turn, I'll have 81, and then at the end, just from regular science production and possibly developing a tech, he'll have 101. So I'll be 20 behind. In this deck, Silent already has 2 impacts. So I want to consider those as +5 each. So he's actually like 30 points ahead of me. And so I think a lot of things need to happen in order for me to be able to beat Silent in this game, which is he needs to not have a war himself. He can still go for 18 resources, which is enough for another army. So he needs to not have a war himself. And I think that I need to be able to finish a wonder at the same time. And his impacts need to not be good. And that's really tough. That's just really tough to happen. The first hurdle, of course, is not him having not a war himself. But even in that case where he doesn't have a war, he can improve his impacts. He can seed, and each time he seeds, it's worth an extra 8 points over me is my general assumption. So if he seeds 2 more times, that's another +16 ish. And I'm just trying to detail how big of a gap that I think that we have together is. And if one of those seeds is impact of science, if one of those seeds is impact of balance, I think. If one of those seeds is impact of science or impact of balance, I'm gonna have some issues. Basically, I don't have a lot of very good impacts for me. I have impact of science. Impact of science in my hand. Sorry, the one that I was worried about at the time when I was playing was impact of technology. Sorry, not impact of science. Sorry. Impact of technology was the one that I was worried about. And if he gets something that's much, much bigger, I'm going to have a really tough time catching up. So my thought here is, in order for me to get the max amount of points, I need to win by the maximum amount that I can, finish spaceflight, and somehow deny one of the other wonders as well. But the big problem is that since there's 2 wonders that he can go for Mech Ag and then go for Red Cross as well, it's not easy for me to do, basically. Yeah, it's not easy for me to deny him at those things. So I kind of have to disregard it just a little bit in order to think about it at all. And I will talk about this line at the very, very end of the game, I think. Which is, at this stage in the game, even though it seems super strange. Okay, so I don't leave myself enough resources for a wonder. I do go for the spaceflight here. I could have gone for a knight instead, and this would make it so that I'm 3 less strong. But I'm basically relying on myself to get the impact of the economic progress to come out. The only problem is that it won't come out. If Silent gets a war, Genghisip is definitely going to war. And even if just Tamirys seeds, I only have a 50-50 shot of getting it. So that's kind of a problem. This tank could be too greedy, but at the same time, I'm looking that I need every single point that I can get. And I think even 3 is relevant. So I do take the spaceflight here and Marie, but I think that this is wrong. And the reason that I think this is wrong is because I think Silent has a really tough time taking wonders, actually. He has so many already that if they come out on here, it would take 7 actions for him to take a wonder. So he would basically pass his entire turn if he were to build a wonder. So my thought here is, if I want to deny a wonder, I could take engineering instead. It's very strange looking, but it's just coming at the fact that, like, I really can't let Silent finish a wonder. And that's basically it. I think that Silent can't finish a wonder, and I probably should have grabbed engineering here. Yeah. So there's that. Anyways, I do go for the spaceflight. I do go for Marie. The spaceflight is worth about 20 or 21 points for me. whereas fast food chains is worth like 25 or something for me, and maybe a little bit more for Silent. But I'm kind of thinking that at this point that if economic progress comes out, I'll get the biggest spaceflight I can, and then I can still deny fast food chains. But again, it's also possible that this is too greedy and I should just go for that line without building this tank and only building the knight instead. But anyways, this is my turn, and I just kind of have to make my bed with it. So fast food chains does come out. First off, impact of happiness is really good for me at this point. So that does go for the farm. Even these two actions would be too much to go for fast food chains. I think if I denied the engineering, then Silent could have gone for fast food chains right away. Should have to grab fast food chains right away, basically. But there was a chance that fast food chains wouldn't be the card that shows up, and that I would have been able to deny the wonder completely if I went for this. So I think that because I only revealed 2 cards, that the engineering play was still statistically better. So because Silent goes for engineering, he can now take and finish a wonder in the same turn, next turn. And Genghisip, of course, goes for a war as well. And then I did have one more thought that I didn't consider as well, is that instead of taking the spaceflight again, or instead of doing some random things, I could have also taken the rockets, which would completely deny Modern Army in itself, and that would give me a bigger war as well. So if I did something else, took the rockets, and still somehow got a wonder, that also could have been a possibility for my maximum point differential. And Tamirys does have the Modern Army, but he doesn't seed this turn, so now I only have a 50-50 shot on the economic progress. So this is like a pretty bad case for me, I think, to let him get to 50, even though initially his total strength should have been probably somewhere around the 40 range. So I did lose a lot in this by letting him get the rockets. And then I try to go for the flip, and I actually miss it. So I can't even finish the space flight. I can't deny the fast food chains. And yeah, I pretty much am resigned to being second at this point. I can't see a possible way, especially because Silent now has even more resources to do stuff with. And yeah, pretty much it. So you can see that going into this, Silent has a pretty small lead, but I do think that the impacts will make a big difference. Impact of progress, pretty even actually, because I got the satellites out. Impact of variety is actually not bad for me either, even though I only have the SARS. Impact industries mine, so I do a little bit better there. Impact balance, which was pretty bad for me. And then impact agriculture, which is really bad for me and really good for science. So my spaceflight was only 20. So even if I somehow did, or my spaceflight was like 21 or something, but I wouldn't have been able to increase my own impact of industry or something. So if I look at this point finish and I say, if I had just finished spaceflight, would I have won? Then the answer is still I would not have won this game if I had still finished spaceflight. So I'm not too upset that I recognize that I was in a pretty deep hole and that I needed literally every point possible. And even if I just denied spaceflight and sorry, if I finished Spaceflight and I finished Fast Food Chains, Silent still had Red Cross to play with and would have had more resources, and I believe would have been able to finish, get a bigger impact of agriculture as well. Um, so I think almost no matter what, I would have been a little tiny bit short on points. Maybe if I somehow was able to squeeze in the Wonder and deny rockets and have the maximum strength, there's a possible line in there. But I'm really looking at it, and I think that on almost every case, I would come up just like a handful of points short, maybe like less than 5, basically. But like I said, I'm pretty happy that I recognize that I was in a pretty deep hole with certain impacts. If things like technology and balance in agriculture came out, which some of them did, that I would be kind of in a struggle place. I would be in a struggle. I would be in a struggling place. Even though it looked like the war did catch me up a lot, I still had to get lucky that Silent didn't have a war himself as well. So I'm pretty content with the fact that I went for the absolute maximum that I could, and I did get punished for it, but at the same time, I still wouldn't have been able to win anyways. With this result, it means that Silent finishes 2 points ahead of me. In the other game, Warziniech actually took second, so he beats me on tie breaks. So I'm ending the International Championship with 16 points, and I am being relegated, which I think is a very, very high point count to be relegated at. Last season, it was like 8 or something was the second place, second to the bottom. So obviously, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed, but I'm pretty happy with my performance in this season regardless. It was kind of a free roll of a season for me anyways, since I was expecting to take a break. But I was informed that I would probably have to start in Masters again anyways. So the fact that I got a season off and I'm still starting in Masters no matter what, kind of a free roll. In any case, I'll try to continue doing some of these replay analyses when I have time. And I hope you enjoyed watching these, and hopefully I'll see you next season.